All right, so it is 7 o'clock, and why don't we open up our meeting? Good evening. My name is Howard D'Amico. This is the meeting for October 7th for the Finance Committee. And as Jean asked, and I think we're going to do for each meeting from now on, no matter who's here and who our guests are, I really would like to just start around the room and introduce everybody. So Carol, if you would start.
Carol Gogolinsky.
I'm Lynn Mazzulli.
Michael Hutnack.
Howard D'Amico.
Sandy Kuipers.
Heather Moore.
Dick Vandenberg.
Matt Wojcik.
Jean Lovett.
And if I could, for our guests, I'm not sure if you guys qualify as guests, but if you could just give your position.
Finance Director, Town Accountant.
Okay,
Town Administrator.
thank you. All right. Okay, so one of the things I think I've talked about in the last couple of years, and probably talked about even this spring at one of the last meetings, was I really would like, and we've got a new member, we've got several members who've only gone through the rotation, this is their second time through. I've never gotten kind of an overview at the beginning of a year of just how our town budget works. There are always some terms, Jean, in particular, that you use that, with all respect to you guys, you see them every day. You know them. And for all of us, we have just different businesses, different things we do during the workday that the terms aren't as familiar to us. And so I would ask, I think, Matt, if you don't mind, I think you suggested if Jean could just help us out, give me a few minutes, just kind of an idea of what how the revenue comes in, what forms of revenue come in. And, you know, we've talked over the years of just kind of, if you will, different baskets, different names.
With that said, I wanted to be understood, Howard put a 1-hour cap on this. So I'm going to go through this very quickly, and we'll
You
have
have 5
follow-up
minutes.
questions at
Right.
another meeting. How's
Right.
that?
Jean, I trusted you to cover it in a shorter period of time.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know me,
God bless you.
and will get to know me during this budget season, there are a couple rules that I have. One, I will never state a number that I don't have prepared in front of me. I will be happy to come back at a future meeting, or I'll send a follow-up email after the meeting. I think it's, you know, numbers stick. People tune in for that split second and they don't hear a correction. So whatever I go through here, if you have any follow-up questions, you know, I encourage you to ask them, because your understanding of this is very important, but again, it's, you know, I don't do that. We also don't use the word found money, laundered money, any of those terms are not acceptable. They've been tried at the Board of Selectmen's meeting in jest, but they got an hour presentation on how well you don't use those terms. So in essence of time, we're just gonna avoid those words. So you should see this, and for some of you, this is very familiar. This is what Matt passed out at the beginning of the budget season. This is what we use to project our revenues. And basically, there's 4 buckets that we get revenue from. There's the tax levy, which includes what the property and real estate taxes, new growth, and the 2.5%. That's like in one little bucket. We have state aid. You'll hear that referred to as a cherry sheet. At one time, it was on a pink form. It no longer is. We get it through email. We have local receipts, which comprises of motor vehicle, building permits, you know, all those things that fall into that category. And then we have transfers. The transfers would be from stabilization or ambulance receipts, reserve for appropriation, where there's funds outside of the general fund that we bring in to cover the operating budget. So the ambulance receipts are restricted. They're put in their own account, and that is part of our revenue source. We say, hey, we're going to take part of that revenue and we're going to bring it in to cover the FY20 operating budget. The ambulance is not self-sufficient. We do supplement that with general fund revenues, but it is used as one of our funding sources. In addition, this year we use wetlands protection as well. You know, 20,000 came in. That was from a source outside of the general fund revenues. We did a transfer to bring it in to cover the operating budget. So those are the 4 basic buckets. Now, I'd use some terms that you probably have never heard before: new growth, 2.5%. I don't need to go through them. I did attach a quick definition that you can read at your own leisure, put you to sleep tonight, so that maybe you can understand it a little bit more clearly. With that said, we start the budget process, we're starting it now. We're not starting it now for FY '20, and we start it in January, February for FY '21. So we're predicting the budget we finalize it at the May town meeting for beginning July 1st through June 30. Things happen. You know, we're doing our best to project it, we're doing our best to project revenues. We have a House 1 budget, which means we don't have a final cherry sheet, again, that's state aid. So we have to wait till all of that comes through. New growth is not certified until the fall. So those are the two pieces we use to really fund the second, what I consider the second piece of the FY '20 budget. We fund most of it on the annual town meeting, and then we look at where we are now, and we look at what new growth was certified at, and what the cherry sheet came in, and then we adjust the FY '20 budget in November. So I look at it as a two-part process. And so you will see raise and appropriate at this town meeting.
And
Yes.
we're in the FY budget right now, right?
Correct.
July 1/019 to June 30, 2020.
Correct.
Okay.
So departments have come to Matt or to me or to both of us and say, hey, these are the needs that we still need to address in FY '20. They weren't part of our original appropriation, so we look at those needs now. And again, we look at the certified new growth, and we look at the adjustment of the cherry sheet. The cherry sheet adjustment can go up or down, and it has been over the last couple of years. In this particular year, I'm going to have you go to the second sheet, which it looks like this. And I'm going to take you through this. So we budgeted the new growth at $125,000. It was actually certified at $400,776. We are conservative with our revenue estimates across the board. So you will always see new growth probably at that 125 mark when we set the budget back in January through March. The biggest component to that is probably the 40B project. You know, we estimated that again at 125, it came in at 477. There was a $10 adjustment to the 2.5%. There was an amendment new growth of $385. The new growth used for the FY '20 budget was $25,000. And then we put money aside for anybody that may feel like their taxes are not where they should be. So they can file an abatement by February 1st with the Board of Assessors, and we have to have money put aside in case they win that appeal. So that's what the allowance for abatements is. That's the 124,943.57. The assessor, the principal assessor did ask us to increase that from the $100,000 that we had budgeted, and that was because there was evaluations that were changing this year, and that she felt there may be more applications for an abatement. So there was an additional cherry sheet. Again, we don't get the cherry sheet till after July 1st. We use House 1 numbers. So there was $17,949 in our favor this year. So between the new growth estimate and the additional cherry sheet, that was $269,176. And then I break down where I think we're going to be using the money at the fall town meeting. Again, this is a raise and appropriate. You can only raise and appropriate until the tax rate is set. So you will see it at the at the annual town meeting, you'll see it at the fall town meeting. At the spring town meeting, it has to be a transfer. You can no longer raise and appropriate because the tax rate's set. So we're allowed to do that at this time. Article 1, this is the FY '20 budget amendment. There's $182,800. That's additional funds that we feel the departments need for the FY '20 budget. There's the selectmen's expense, that's a separate article, and we'll go through the town meeting warrant after. And there's Article 7. And then there's what's called an estimated LA5 excess capacity. So this is the money that we did not spend that we could have. So we're leaving $21,876. And again, this is estimated because one, town meeting hasn't happened yet. So this is anticipating that everything is going to be voted as we presented and approved. And number 2, we have not finalized the recap. So this is where we think we're going to be when we go to set the tax rate, if everything happens as planned. How'd I do?
Just 5 minutes.
Too fast.
I'm sorry?
Too fast. I didn't understand half
You
of
said
that.
I had 5 minutes.
Well, you left more room for questions.
So Gene, for the new growth, is it partly just the 2.5% that can go up, and then partly anticipating increase in population in the town? That more people will be paying taxes?
New
or is
growth
it
is
just-
from new construction,
Okay.
additions, it's strictly, the 2.5% is one piece, so the taxes automatically go up 2.5%.
Right.
In addition to that, it goes up by new growth. And
So-
that would be any new buildings, any
So if you just
construction.
have an empty plot of land and you decide to build a house on it, it's now new growth.
So the new growth is new building construction.
Right.
Or
For that
additions.
first year only.
First year only.
First year only. And then it's on the tax rolls.
It's in the base.
It's, exactly, it's in that base.
So if you had no new building in a year, for instance, for whatever reason, then the new growth would only be the 2.5.
Right.
It wouldn't be new growth.
wouldn't
It
be
would
new
just be the
growth.
2.5%
Yeah, there would be no-
tax
gotcha, okay.
increase. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And there were times when that new growth went way down.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that,
Yeah.
which is why
Yeah.
we estimated
Right.
125.
Yeah.
If you look at one of the other sheets I provided, it kind of breaks it down a little bit for you, where it tells you the levy limit, the amended new growth number, the 2.5%, and the new growth. So you can see the numbers and how they make up that base.
So over time, have building permits every year for new construction been pretty predictable?
They've been going up the last 2 years.
Yeah, they have. They trend to market, but we have the 40B project up on North Street.
Right.
And that's a really big share of it.
Can you
And we
just
have a-
remind us what that is?
The 40B, those are condominiums. It's 40B is a privilege process through zoning for high-density construction because there has to be a low to moderate income component.
Right.
Allows them to waive any number of things, Concom regulations, in order to get building efficiency. They're gonna build, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget exactly, I think it's 164 units. They're about a third of the way through.
Where is that?
North
North
Street,
Street.
North Street on the left-hand side?
very close to the Sutton border.
Yeah.
Far from the Sutton.
And how many of those are the low to moderate? Is it like 30%?
10%.
Shockingly small
I
number,
think it's 10%.
10%.
They did a lottery, I know that.
10% it has to be allowed. And they allow, that way they can override zoning, they can override quite a few things. Because that was originally an industrial zone
Yes.
parcel, but they were able to do residential.
So when does a parcel or a property or a condo up there hit the certified new growth? When does it get added? When does it become certified? On issuance of an occupancy permit, upon sale?
No, so I've asked the assessor this question, you know, she can tax based on the stage of completion that you're at,
Interesting, okay.
and I believe we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
So I think it kind of goes to the stages of, you know, basically foundation,
Right.
rough,
Yeah.
finish, final. And that if it doesn't, it's very similar to that.
Okay. So this says, Gene, certified new growth, and
Correct,
you're
we were certified in September.
for 400,076, and I think you just suggested a lot of that is off that project, right?
Quite
That's a big
bit
number.
of it is. We did have a busy year for building permits
Okay.
for single-family home construction. Don't put me to a test. When we get to that part of the revenue budget, we can be very precise because we track that, you know, right down to the last detail.
But is it a sense roughly that a third of that has been hit to certified new growth?
I think it's fair to say
Yeah,
that the 40B drives about 30% of that.
And so we should expect to see a couple, either the next year see 60 or 70% more, or over the next few years, see it if it heads to
Yeah.
completion. Okay, all right.
Well, there's only so many a year they're gonna be putting up, so I
Okay.
don't think you're gonna see it. I think you're not gonna see it like jump by 60% next year.
Should be the same for the next
I
2
think
years.
it'll pretty much stay the
They need to
same until they
budget
built out.
conservatively.
And that all depends upon whether the interest rates go up and the economy stays good and you know, we're really riding a little crest of it now,
Right.
so.
Town administrator financial updates. Who's the town? That's you, right?
I have no intention of being so efficient
That's
Gene,
fine, that's fine.
cramming that much information.
That was impressive.
It was, I think.
I caught every third word, and I'm gonna digest it in that manner.
I got them all, Gene, I got them all.
Don't tell her that, she's not gonna talk
Was I
anymore
too
at this
fast?
meeting.
No, you
That
were
was
fine.
good, it was good. Thank you.
I can't talk.
And
enough.
Gene, sincerely, thank you, because I have
I
asked
got
you.
that the cherry sheet.
And I appreciated,
That's what I got.
Gene, I even appreciate the notes.
Well, that, yeah.
Those help, yep. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I got two things before I hand them out. One is a very preliminary preview and sort of an insight into the way I like to think about budgets and present budgets. The other is a fairly detailed timeline for this committee and its interaction with the administration to have good meetings in timely fashion. It sounds like I'm in pain. I'm not. I have plenty of energy. It just doesn't work right. Long story short is as much as Gene is a type A, I'm a type B about the budget. And it takes a team like this to get the kind of results I think we've been able to post for the last 2 years. At some point, usually it's the end of March, I flip the switch, turn into a type A, and give you this spreadsheet that should balance down to the very last dollar.
Yep.
And you'll have as much detail as you could ever have wanted in your life. But in all honesty, that's not how I think about budgets. And that's why I buck efforts to drive right down to very small details, because I don't think it's a helpful process. But it's not just because it's inconvenient to me to produce large books with multiple pages. That's not my point. I've been doing this for a long time, and my personal view is that the way we approach a problem, especially a numerical issue, drives the way we interact with each other, and whether or not those interactions are productive or not. So when I put a great big book down on the table, it's intimidating, because I'm more or less saying, I know all this, and if you're going to keep pace with me, you have to know it as well as I do. The reality is you don't. And it takes everybody off mission. Mission here, we should, in all honesty, the town of Douglas should never have needed a strategic budget committee, because the strategic budget committee is this finance committee, setting the tone for a long-range plan for the town's finances and holding everybody to their word and to their plans to achieve that is the responsibility both of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, but especially the Finance Committee, because you have more authority to deal with the school side than we do, even though we practically run a lot of their operations. So, having said that, how can we approach the budget in a way where we're faithful to what it is without making it so complicated that it's hard to talk about? So I've taken my best stab at it. I'll wait until the pile gets back to me before I start. Give me a chance to lubricate my throat, too.
Yep.
No, I'll just choke on it.
Are you contagious?
No.
There's a space on your side.
Not unless he bites you.
For people like me with asthma, every cold turns into an infection
Oh, is that what it is?
because I just can't stop it from geometrically increasing. So, to my mind, achieving a balanced budget is an iterative and systemic problem or issue. We iterate because we're going to go back and forth between line items and the bottom line until we achieve the result that we want. We're not just going to do it all in one fell swoop, arrive at a bottom line and say, oh, that's what it is. We need to go back and forth with bigger goals in mind and not just being able to say we've achieved one specific financial goal. So that's my first bullet point, which is about the only thing I'll actually read verbatim. A budget is a dynamic system of interrelated pieces. Sustainable balance arrives from giving equal or near equal weight to all of the key components or objectives of a budget. The budget is a policy document as much as it is a financial document. If we overemphasize one thing to the expense of another, we find ourselves in future years having to backtrack and rebuild and refund the things that we let fall down in order to do that one objective. It's a terrible way to run any organization. Imagine if you're at a private company You're in a bus company and you buy all brand new buses and you hire idiots to drive them, and they wreck all the buses. So what if you, it doesn't help to overemphasize one aspect to the expense of another. So 3 key principles for us. We are an employer. We compete for qualified staff to deliver the services that in many cases are for the benefit of everybody who lives in town. So if our wages get way far behind, if our benefits are poor in comparison with other towns, we will struggle to get those choice employees. Choice employees not only perform well, they stay loyal to you, so you get the benefit of their experience, things that we can't build into a price. And over a long time, over a longer period of time, especially in the public safety side, people will stay with you for a long time. Not only build experience, they build in the level of responsibility they're able to accept. So a firefighter becomes a lieutenant becomes a deputy chief becomes a chief. And you avoid a lot of the mistakes that people make coming in cold from the outside. Asset management is an essential piece of all things. And pardon me, a lot of people think of it as a capital plan. Oh, we're gonna have a capital plan. What are the big things they want to buy for the next 5 years? And that's very true. It's part of best practices. But when you write a capital plan, you soon begin to realize, I need an asset management plan. I need to demonstrate to people, and I'm not just buying a fire engine to run a fire department. There's all kinds of assets that support the operations of a fire department. Some of them will be expensed because they only have a useful life of a year or two. Others aren't expensive enough, but they need to last for a long time. They form part of an asset base that makes the town work. It's a very, I'm on page 45 of this thing. It's a very impressive amount of stuff that it takes to run even a small town like Douglas. Millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars are sunk into the asset base of the town. If you think about our school buildings, our municipal buildings, and I use the price point as a point of reference, is what would it cost to buy it new? So a ladder truck's $1 million, fire engine's $550,000, $600,000. So when you start adding all this stuff up, and you add all the small stuff up too, the computers, the printers, the software licenses that we own, it's a tremendous amount of money. If you don't maintain or repair your assets, you diminish your operational capacity. Doesn't make any sense to hire the best employees if you equip them with poor or substandard things to do their jobs with. So if I'm going to go out and get a really slow computer because it's cheap and I put it in a police cruiser, and I've got this highly trained, highly motivated police officer can't run a plate in time, it's all a waste. So there has to be balance. And the last thing is, one of the biggest line items in the budget is the town's contribution to the school system. It goes in as one line. It's a bottom line number. The school committee hears the details of the school budget and works on it with the superintendent and the business manager to arrive at a number they feel comfortable with, based largely in part upon the feedback they get from me and Gene on what we can afford to give them and what they expect from their various aid sources. But for the long-term financial health of the community, this is a discrete item, because the more competitive the school district is, the more self-sustaining it becomes financially. So a school system on decline will show very little school choice in, increasing school choice out. Placements to the technical and agricultural schools will go up. And over a longer period of time, property values start to loosen up a little bit and start to get shaggy, because that basic quality of life item isn't available to a group of people who are actively seeking to buy homes, people in the family range. So it creates tremendous financial weakness to neglect the school system. And that is part of where I'm coming from with it. I think the superintendent and I have a great line of communication open about this. That doesn't mean we give them every dollar they ask for. We have to put them through a process to make sure that they're investing in the most competitive things. That's the school committee's policy place to take, and for us, it's just we're a financial check and balance. So we start our conversation around the revenue piece, and then we start to build awareness around what are the fixed components of spending. So there are things that we just can't change, no matter how hard we try. There are things that are growing that we can change. But the importance of your support and the Board of Selectmen's support in helping us get those things changed can't be underemphasized, because if we don't address the most rapidly growing accounts, we're left with very little that we can do to get the budget off autopilot. There's not a lot of fat on the Douglas budget. There's almost none. So the next page is a very quick summary of some of what Jean has already presented. This is an important point when it comes to talking to everyday taxpayers who say, my bill went up 2.5%, so the town must be flush with money. 2.5% is a lot. Plus, they get all that money from the state. What the heck are these people doing? And state aid's pretty flat. And if you look at that purple portion of the bar, it's a big part of the bar. So the downside of getting a lot of aid from the state, and we do, is that if it doesn't grow, then you're highly reliant upon a source of revenue that is not growing. So when you offset that, you have, even assuming 2.5% year over year for the next 5 years in a 5-year budget plan, what does that translate into? Just about 1.7% on the bottom line of the revenues. And that 1.7% also includes local receipts growing at 2% a year. So those are our building permits and other small local receipts. So 1.7%, I don't know if that wouldn't be a great interest rate, right? But the economy's been no inflation for so long, we think of it as at least, well, 1.7 is something, but it really isn't much. We did a COLA survey last year, for instance. Overwhelming majority of municipalities were giving out 3% COLAs in their collective bargaining agreements with all of their units. And Douglas is at 1.75. So, you know, we're not competing with that, but we're still trying to stay in line with the rate of our revenue increase. What is 1.7% increase? These numbers look very precise, but let's treat them as estimates, okay? It's about $515,000 of new revenue this year that we didn't have last year, not counting the things that the unanticipated high number for new growth. So just a 1% increase in the school budget's $135,900. So look how fast you would eat up 515. So here's the rest of the story. It's just on the town side. Before we even talk about the schools, what do we know are right now, the state of the budget model as it is right now without any updates. The largest growing account is a little over 100,000. That's the town's contribution to the retirement fund for both teachers and municipal employees.
Not teachers.
No, well, they have
The
FICA.
paras, the EMS teachers
Yeah.
come separately. So it'd be anybody under the Worcester Regional, which would be the
There are
paras,
some people over
custodians,
there that are in
cafeteria.
Worcester. But it's 102,000, so we are on a mandatory 9.95% increase to our annual required contribution every year. What does all that gobbledygook mean? Worcester Regional Pension Fund is critically underfunded, horribly underfunded. And even at this arc, we're not keeping pace with an arc that would be necessary to make it actuarially sound within a foreseeable period of time. If we paid that arc, we'd be in the double digits. So this is one piece that we're not really going to change. Employees' health insurance is next, but notice it's really not a lot of money. It's going up. We're estimating it'll go up by 65%, which is a 4% increase.
Matt, can I bring you to your
Sure.
last page, unless there's something you want to cover on that next last page?
No, you're knocking me off my pace. It's not a good thing to do to a sick guy, because I was about to wrap it up. But I got to talk about health insurance, because that's school. Okay, so we have school expenses on our side of the budget. It's an important thing to remember as we go through the conversation with the schools, is that we have their retiree health insurance and we have their health insurance on our side. So wages and salaries don't come down until items 3 and 4. Just, there's not a lot of big numbers here. The 10th most rapidly growing account is going to go up $8,500. So it looks like a budget that's very much under control. So from a high altitude point of view, with all the assumptions, if we add the schools, with BVT going up 4.5%, the school bus contract increasing at 6%, if we give the schools a 1%, we're at balance. So in very short order here, I've kind of told you the whole shebang. This is how we think of the budget. But the only moving piece I haven't talked about is property casualty insurance. That's because Howard wants me to move along. But
So I can ask questions.
we pretty much just did the budget, right? So if you think about it, at a high altitude level, these are the major moving pieces of the budget. If you want us to have a substantial impact on the way our bottom line looks, these are the accounts we have to work well. You know, I have my favorite. I'm sure other people have their favorite. My favorite school bus contract, which I think is still an abomination at this point. So that's how I get to the first round of the budget process. And when we fill in the details with a lot of things that are already done. So we know we have a good handle on what our personnel budget is. We have some handle on what our insurance rates are going to be for the next couple of years because of the nature of the contracts we've entered into. It will end up with very little to wait for in March. So the big number that comes in, the last number, and it's always an estimate, it's never a hard number, is the property casualty premiums. Some $300,000.
300,000 for the premiums or?
That's for all of the things that go into that line, workers' comp, E&O.
But that's not an increase number.
No, that's not the increase, that's a total budget
Yeah,
number.
okay, all right. Matt, a couple of quick questions. The next to the last page, those 10 categories, 10 line items. Is it safe to say tonight that for the most part, those are fixed numbers? They're right, those aren't things this group is going to wind up voting up or down. There might be contracts that renew over the next year, but those will be more at the Board of Selectmen level or your level, correct?
They're largely fixed. Let me tell you, the pieces that are in motion, we will be negotiating with the teachers this year. And the way things typically work, and it's only fair, they set the tone for the COLA that will come over to the rest of the town. So I'll be part of the team, and that is my bias going into it, is that I'm thinking about whatever we agree to at that table is going to carry through to the rest of my budget. So that is an open number this year.
2021, that'll
Yeah.
affect 2021, okay.
And then on the health insurance, the retiree numbers are going to go down a lot.
Will we be able to use this from October as a guide into March when you say, well,
Yeah.
here's the contract we had, and that number that I projected back then at 102 turned out to be 87 or turned out to be 144?
That's the point.
Right, to work off the 515 number.
Just, maintain your versioning.
Yeah.
Keep the date on, but that slide
Yeah,
will update
okay,
every time we
okay.
talk about top 10 accounts.
Matt, can I walk you through then the math on the last page? Because just quickly, it didn't add up to me, but I suspect it's because there are subtle crisscrosses of the two pages. If I take your 10 groups at the 323,694, right, that's where that number carries over from. And then I add the BVT number, the school bus number, and the 135. Just quick math gets me up over 600, minus the 25 you suggest as the deficit would be at 590, 595, but you've got a number of 515.
So we have other changes.
Why are those
Yeah.
numbers off?
We have other changes in the budget,
Okay,
things that go up and down.
okay, all right. Okay, fair enough.
But it's all the smaller stuff. Everything that's
Yeah,
under
yeah, yeah.
$8,500,
Yeah.
but then you start to add it up line by line, comes up to about that much.
Okay. What was our increase for the Douglas school system year over year last year? What was their percentage increase?
2.5.
Two and
Two-
change.
2.5? Does that sound right? Okay. And anybody remember the BVT number?
5, wasn't
Snow 6 point,
Okay,
close to 7.
okay.
So here's an example of how the numbers don't.
Yeah,
Norfolk Aggie, we're having changes in the student population and the number of students we send. So I don't account for that in this roll-up, because it's whatever, $15,000, $16,000 difference. Those
Right.
are some of the dribs and drabs that go up.
yep. Anybody with any questions? Okay. Right. Special town meeting.
Well, hold on, because we got the timeline to go through. Unless you want to hold on to this when you talk about next meeting dates.
No, if you've got a timeline.
I prepared this for you back in June. I don't know if the committee's met,
Okay.
No, this is this meeting after that.
but I still think we can hold to this. I didn't edit this at all
Okay.
for tonight.
Oh, this is your timeline for who we might see when. Okay, yeah.
Well, we did see this, a version of this.
I may have emailed it around.
Yeah, I remember seeing
Last
this.
meeting. I think that's when I was deposed.
I don't remember.
Carol's got my back the whole budget season though.
Harold. Yeah.
She said.
Oh, Carol, there you go. You could have called me at 12:15 overnight and said, you're not going to appear today. Never mind, it's a news story.
So you can take this under advisement, Mr. Chairman, but right now, this schedule would call for you to finish the fall STM warrant tonight, and that Gene and I would be getting some instructions and timelines out to department heads by late October. My first piece there is that personnel supplement that I passed out last year, which was every employee and the change in their base compensation. I'm working on that now. It should be done by the end of the week. I anticipated being done last week, but there's just a little bit more to it. The only significant change I anticipate, I have an estimated COLA. This is very good news from my perspective. We negotiated in the police officer's contract an increase to their base pay if they were to achieve accreditation during the life of the contract. And based on a very positive review the department got this morning, we're on track. By fiscal '21, the budget will have to include that incentive. It's not a ton of money, but it's a sum of money. That was the only outside source of increase in the compensation profile of the town, other than steps and COLAs. We want to get capital done before the holidays.
If I may, you are now taking me a little out of my cadence.
Yeah,
So I might ask to have this
This
come
whole-
around to
the
new
end.
meeting dates. Is that all right?
yeah.
Okay.
If I could just add one thing, because
Sure.
I like to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
We did get the free cash certified, and it is $1,551,312. And I would like to publicly thank all the departments for their help and cooperation at the close of the year. It was scheduled for late October, and it was certified at the beginning of October.
Okay, thank you. And if we move to the discussing of the special town meeting, is there anything to discuss as a line item other than to review the warrants?
You didn't answer the chairman's question.
That's-
Oh, I'm sorry.
to you.
That was me.
Sure, I'm sorry, Gene, and it is. And so we kid around a little bit, but I will defer to you. This is my first year rotating through the
I'm sorry,
chair.
I just didn't realize
And so I'm
that.
just trying to understand a little bit of what you guys do, what you folks do versus what we do to keep the process rolling.
Okay.
And I will say that over the years, whether it was any of the past chair, what they might have done behind the scenes it's hard for us or me to know what they were doing behind the scenes. I don't want to drop that ball because it was assumed we knew to do it.
I gotcha.
All right? So at the moment, I see, so what we've got on the agenda is the review the articles. And I think I asked you before we got on the record tonight, right? I asked you about the minutes and how those appeared, and you said, Mary does that. So how does this document show up tonight?
So fall is probably driven more by us.
Okay,
Spring is probably more driven by you.
okay,
Because this is, I hate to use the word cleanup, but wouldn't you agree, this is, we're making sense of the year.
yeah,
Based on our pace of spending and the needs of the town and what's available from new growth and free cash.
This is what I said in my 5-minute presentation.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
piece.
yeah, sure.
So we asked the departments to review their budget in September and see what we missed, or are there anything that happened between July and September that they anticipate it's gonna happen because our next town meeting is not until May. So
Right.
this has got to hold them until May unless they come before the finance committee for a reserve fund transfer. So we've gone back to the departments and, we looked at where they were, what their needs may be now that we're, 3 months into the fiscal year. And that's what you see is Article 1, is any kind of budget adjustments. Stepping back, I said I look at the FY20 budget in 2 pieces. One at the annual town meeting, that's what we knew as of March. This is what we expect to happen in FY20. And then we look at it again at this time and say, okay, now what you need. Remember, this is the last time we can raise and appropriate. It's the last time we can raise and appropriate before we set the tax rate. So anything after that is a transfer. To have a transfer, you need available funds, and because the budgets are so tight, it's hard to do that at the spring town meeting. So we're looking at a transfer from free cash, or, 9 times out of 10, actually, 9.9 times out of 10, you will always see snow and ice on the spring town meeting, but we try to limit those types of things. So, Article 1, and Matt can speak with tree warden expense. Do you want to go through them now?
Well, bear with me. I'm looking to get a little process still and then go through them. So this document, is this already ready to circulate out to the community?
It is still in draft mode. You
Okay.
can see the watermark there.
Okay, but that's nothing as well that you require from us for it to get out?
Well, yes, this becomes part of the FinCom flyer. So you will have to put your recommendation.
Which we'll do tonight.
No,
We won't do tonight?
you will not do tonight. This is really just presenting you. I don't even believe it's been approved by the board. No, we're not finalized.
Still open.
So they're meeting the 15th, and
Week.
you'll be meeting the 22nd if you decide to meet that I believe that's.
Okay, and then
This
give
still needs to
recommendations.
solidify somewhat, correct?
I
Okay.
think we're pretty good with
Pretty
this,
close.
and unless something comes up, I think this is probably what you're gonna see,
Okay,
but it hasn't been approved by the board.
but you want us to wait till the 22nd to go through and vote?
Correct.
Okay, and at that point, again, nonetheless, at that point, it goes out to the town, not through us, correct?
Correct. Well,
Even though it's called the FinCom flyer, Howard and Lynn aren't here sticking them into envelopes at night and putting labels on.
Well, that would be fun, but no. We always like group activities. What happens is Suzanne will send you, as the chair, this document. You will put a commentary below, as well as the finance committee vote. Send it back to Suzanne. She then sends, puts it in a format, sends it to the printer. The printer prints it, sends it back, and it gets sorted and mailed here.
And
So-
and candidly, I would suggest that as much of that can be accomplished at the meeting would be best.
Accomplished how?
Well, comments, when you say comments, we're going to vote at the meeting on the 22nd.
Your vote will be there, but there's usually a finance committee explanation underneath. That's what's typically happened, that you can choose to do what you want.
And who's our vice chairman that we're going to solicit to do that? Who's the vice chair? Who's the assistant to the vice chairman?
Sounds like The Office.
I would think people that have an attorney's background would be much better writing that.
Oh, my God. Amanda, this is for Amanda. Yeah,
Is that your assistant?
yeah, okay, all right. We'll see how this works out.
So
Okay,
the flyer itself is done, you know, Suzanne does the formatting of the flyer. She, like I said, she sends it to you. You put your commentary underneath, you put the vote underneath. She sends it to the printer, it comes back, and that's done internally. So the finance committee isn't folding and stamping.
and if I were to look at past ones of these, I might find examples
Correct.
of what were comments.
Now, it's not a requirement, but mainly
No,
recommendation that you
because-
send it to us. We do look at what you put as a commentary.
Okay.
As a courtesy, if you want that, and I will review it and make any comments that,
Okay. When would it, if we've got a meeting on the 22nd, when would it typically go out or need to go out?
Suzanne has that timeline, pretty shortly, because she's taking a vacation, and I think that's
All right.
moving with the timeline.
So you want that commentary within a day or two
Oh, yeah.
after?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay, Lynn, yep, all right. You got that?
No, don't even look at me.
Okay.
October
I
15th,
got it.
December
I got
7th,
it.
don't
I
talk
got
to
it.
me.
So we're good, I've got it. All right, then, as a practical matter, Gene, is there a reason to go through these tonight? If we're going to
Yeah,
see
we
them relatively close and tight in 2 weeks?
You should do it
No,
tonight.
I'd like to go through them.
It
Want to know what
allows
it's
you-
all
I
about.
have a question about.
It allows you time to ask questions.
Yeah,
If you wanted to have any other department heads present for any of the articles, that, you know, to have
Okay,
further
okay,
explanation.
fair enough, okay.
We don't,
No,
I mean,
that
it's
makes
really a
sense.
very broad,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to go through them?
I'll go through a couple of the bigger ones, and then if there's a question about the smaller ones, you can ask me.
Okay,
The tree warden expense, that's all for tree removal in the public ways. We estimate we have 5,000 dead trees. We barely touched it with the first 40,000. So this is more or less emergency funding to get the next batch of really threatening, dangerous trees.
So this was when we talked about for the next 3 years, there was like 20,000 allotted.
Right, we were trying to do this gradually, and what we're learning from experience.
The trees are falling
The
like
trees are
crazy.
falling like crazy,
I
so,
had 2 taken down
yeah.
in my yard thanks to
Does
this.
National Grid do some on its own? or not?
National Grid is spending way more than this in
Yeah,
Douglas.
yeah, way more than that.
Yeah. They're going to be starting work soon on the feeder line, getting vegetation away from the feeder line. But, you know, they still need us to do our part. And
How
there are
many trees did you say, Matt? 5,000?
about 5,000
Caterpillars did a number on
Yeah.
caterpillars in the
Dead
drought.
trees.
And so across the whole town, this is a major, major issue with the forest and the large private holdings. We did some back-of-the-envelope math using population estimates for oak trees and the mortality rate, and we could have 750,000 dead trees in town. So,
Okay.
and the next biggest one is the 71,000. I'll talk about fire and ambulance together, and then I'll skip the rest unless you have a question. Again, I'll be a little bit cavalier, but fall town meeting is typically when we reconcile the compensation and other needs of both fire and ambulance departments and draw down on the fund restricted, you know, the receipts restricted for appropriation from the ambulance and the billings that are done through the ambulance. So we're typically under budgeting a little bit for those wages so that we don't run a deficit, and then we're making a transfer in the fall to cover our anticipated needs. Now this year is a little bit different. We are out to hire because we've had some personnel changes. We may be hiring at a grade higher than the person who left. So we're going to budget for the grade higher and give the chief maximum flexibility to fill the positions. So there's a little bit of extra there to accommodate the fact we might be hiring medics instead of firefighters. Any other item tickle your fancy there?
I'm curious about the dam maintenance and inspection.
So the town routinely takes desirable pieces of property in tax if There's no interest from the private sector, but it would be worthwhile for the town. The piece that went into tax foreclosure and the town foreclosed on it is a fairly large piece of property across the street from the Gilboa Street Mill. It includes that parking lot, but it also includes all the land mass around the edge of that pond. So we basically, now the town owns all the land around the pond. The bad news is it came with a dam.
Yeah, that's why
dam-
nobody wanted it.
Dams have to be inspected every 10 years. The good news is the private owner was on schedule, so this is year 10.
Yeah,
The thing is, it was not an anticipated budget expense. We did not have a cost estimate until recently. The same engineer who did the prior inspection is going to do this one.
Yeah.
Because they're familiar with the dam, so we're getting a break on the price as a result. But that's what the $8,500 for, is to review the structural integrity of the dam.
So we won't see something like that again for 10 years.
I'm
unless
going to
there's-
knock on wood when you say things like that.
unless there's a problem.
I'm going to say this magnificent, incredibly solid, could have been built by the Egyptians dam is going to be just as good 10 years from now as it is now, yeah.
It's gonna be
We don't want to
sold.
fix it.
It's going to be sold.
It's gonna be sold.
Okay.
I think we spend more than that to keep up with the dam up at the reservoir,
Yeah.
so.
All right. That's
The
good.
next one, I'll let Jean speak to it, the OPEB, because it's important.
So, at your next meeting, I'll probably go through the highlights of what happened and how free cash closed, so that you can understand that it's just not extra money. Part of that, though, is we had 50,000 in one of our health insurance accounts. This was, I've been here for 13 years, and when I started, we had a withholding problem where the prior town accountant didn't reconcile them, I guess, for any other, lack of any other words. So I put money into a health insurance withholding account in case, and I started clean accounts in case we needed. I held it for a certain number of years in case it was needed back in the other accounts. I just moved it over to the side. I talked with the auditors this year, and because of our reconciliation process, they were comfortable and I was comfortable closing that out into free cash. So whenever we have things of that nature that related to health insurance, we now put them as part of our OPEB process. So in the annual town meeting, we have a transfer to OPEB trust. At the fall town meeting, we usually transfer any balance that closed from the health insurance retiree account, or this is a one-time time, we will transfer this into the OPEB trust. And again, when I look at free cash, I look at the story behind the numbers. I don't just look at the number and say, hey, this is free cash. I look at where it's coming from and kind of direct it back to where it should be, or make a recommendation, because I really have no power.
So, I guess I'm not understanding. So this is money that's going into that account?
It is part of the 1.5 million free cash now.
Okay.
And I'm suggesting, I'm making a recommendation that we move it into the OPEB trust.
In other words, you had an accrual on the books for some.
Okay.
In the
past
health
lack of
insurance related
reconciliation.
All right,
function.
so you're moving it
Exactly.
to that
Moving it to
account.
That's my
And
recommendation.
that flowed into free cash, so now the question is, what do you do with it? Well, we've got this OPEB that needs to, or could be funded.
Okay.
So it's
Kind of the same money.
appropriate to continue funneling that in a general direction
All right.
towards health and benefits.
So that's where it's going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on where it came from.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's a like kind.
And one of the reasons I think it's good
Good
that Jean does it the way that she does it is because each department gets a budget, for the year that they have. Well, they could say, well, if we don't spend it all, we won't get any more. And that's how it works in the state. I was on some state thing. They were dumping money at the end because if we don't spend it, they won't give us the same much next year. But our departments, they try to be frugal, and if they can turn money back into the town, they will. And they know we're not gonna penalize them the next year. And she's gonna try to whatever help that particular department. So I think that's very good, and it encourages all our department heads, I think, to be as thrifty as possible.
So, Mr. Chairman, Article 5. I will do my best to be concise, but I'm not going to sacrifice content and relevance for the sake of brevity.
That's fine.
The town for some time has been aware of more than one investment group that wants to develop industrial projects on the side of town where Davis Street in Northeast Maine for access to Route 146. That land is zoned industrial in our zoning scheme. It is not served by utilities at this time. There is utility connections up to the high school, a little bit past the high school. And in order for the project to go forward, there would need to be water and sewer and natural gas access. The investment design contemplates that natural gas would be provided by the developer. They would use their know-how in the industry to involve themselves with various high-pressure lines that run parallel to 146 on that side of town. So that takes us out of that mix. But we would have to extend water and sewer to develop those lots. At the Capital Improvement Committee in the late winter, early spring, I asked the group to, first of all, leave some of the free cash that was available, last year's free cash, not this year's certified number, but last year's. Don't spend it all on capital, leave some of it back in case we have to do a match for a MassWorks grant. MassWorks being one of the premier economic development grant programs of the Commonwealth. And some of the two MassWorks projects are going on right on our border now, one in Sutton, one in Uxbridge. Probably very familiar with the one in Uxbridge because they're digging up the road right at 16 and 146. And the Capital Committee, we discussed at some great detail what the plans were, and it was a unanimous vote of the Capital Improvement Committee to support the policy of using free cash as a source to leverage our share of a MassWorks grant or development project, which ostensibly would be many millions of dollars, with most of it coming from the developer or the MassWorks grant, and would turn into new growth for the town. More very large number, a sustainable number to address our tax base and some of the growth issues. So what we're contemplating with this article is that we would set aside and give the town the authority to engage the grant process without having to call a future special town meeting only for that purpose, to address the engineering needs of the project. So first and foremost, the design to extend water and sewer to the subject lots. And then over a longer period of time, the same engineering contract would probably include construction oversight, which would be the lion's share of that $501,000, would actually not be spent unless and until we actually had shovels in the ground, pipes being laid, and the engineers are there every day with their clipboard to make sure that the work is being done right. Having that authority to obligate those funds is a critical part of being able to meet the shovel-ready requirement of a MassWorks grant. So that's why this is here. In an ideal world, look, somebody would come with a pretty picture and say, I'm going to spend this much money in town, won't you spend this much money with me? And the deal is all at least nice and neat. And we go to town meeting and the whole explanation takes 5 minutes. The real world of economic development is much more challenging than that. The purchase and sales agreements on these lots have taken a long time to finalize. Douglas is an old town, so as you can imagine, Mr. Chairman, being an attorney, the title research, the cross interests of different landowners, blah, blah, blah. It's taken a while to get all of this lined up, but we're getting much closer. We are much closer now than we were in the beginning of the year to finally being able to move forward and get the suitors to come to the table with a serious proposal. So I won't belabor this point, but I'll say our 5-year budget plan for the town has one objective that's very important, and that is to not use free cash for the ongoing operations of the town. It is a common practice across Massachusetts. It's perfectly acceptable. There's nothing illegal about it. It's what a lot of towns do. But from the budget purist point of view and from a best practices point of view, the use of free cash for operating budgets is actually, you're running a structural deficit. You're admitting that you're not raising enough revenue to run the town, and you're just using unanticipated revenues to backfill. It's a horrible practice. So we've done a couple of things here. We're trying to front load free cash so that we have enough to sustain the town for the last 3 years of the budget plan. All the time hoping that enough economic development occurs where the tax base grows to the point where the use of free cash for operating won't be necessary. So this is a critical linchpin in the plan to keep the town moving without going to the taxpayer for any additional burden.
Okay.
So I hope that's why we needed to go through this. There's an exclamation point on that one. I don't know if there's anything else here I want to talk to until Article 9.
I'd like to look at one question on the language used in Article 5. So it says to vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds or to borrow the sum of money. There seem like 3 different avenues that the town
The
could go
motion will
down.
be specific. It'll be a transfer from free cash is
Okay.
what we're anticipating.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that will solidify a bit.
Any motion is going to be as broad as we can make it,
Yeah.
and then the motion, I'm sorry, the warrant
On the
language-
floor, we'll ask for one of those methods, not,
The motion, your recommendation will be a transfer from free cash.
yeah. Gotcha.
And the last thing I would say about that is not a dime gets spent unless we got a MassWorks grant.
Right, right.
So we wouldn't
It's
use
not
the
if
authority.
we build it, they will come.
No.
It's, we're going to
They're
build it
coming,
when they
we're
come.
gonna have to build something.
Yeah.
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 It doesn't mean that the vote would have to take place, it wouldn't be expended.
It just earmarks it, that's it.
Yeah, it puts the money
understood.
aside, it's not, it takes it.
Not available for any other use.
Right, right.
Who would be the best person in 2 weeks to talk to us about more specificity on that?
Your Economic Development Commission and me.
Commission or committee? Committee?
One member of the EDC in particular has been active on this issue,
Who's that?
Bob
Bob
Manerick.
Merrick.
Okay. That seems like one of the bigger items on this
Sure.
project, and I could see there being, to Mike's point, right on the issue of funding it. Is it possible to have you and that gentleman here in a couple of weeks?
He's here enough. I'll just lock him in the closet until the next time.
Perfect. Okay.
So I wanted to jump to Article 9, only to bring up a point, which is we had a very successful year obtaining green communities grants. We got about $220,000 this year for 3 distinct projects. Those projects, so not to get into the weeds, but when we fund these things, a couple of things happen. There's also a utility incentive involved in energy efficiency projects. They don't give it to us until the project's been accepted. So, we're getting bills from the contractors for the work, and it may not be accepted yet. So what we do to make this work, and stop me if I'm being too brusque, but we asked town meeting for the authority to spend some funds, knowing that they'll be reimbursed either with grant funds or with the incentives eventually coming back into the general fund, to keep the project liquid. Is that a fair summary?
Any National Grid incentive is not allowed to go directly towards the project.
It's gotta
It
come
has
back
to
to
go
the
into the
town.
general fund and it has to close into free cash. So this
So we
piece.
front load it with free cash to get reimbursed to
Yeah.
free cash.
Yeah. So this is kind of like that National Grid piece. This is one of the components here where the grant didn't fully fund that component is LED at the primary school.
Yes.
LED lighting. It's going to be fully paid by other funds other than taxpayers, but because it has to go into the general fund, we have to appropriate the money, and then next year it'll be certified when it goes through the budget process.
Gene hates it when I say this, but this is one way for us to launder grants
I believe.
and put them
that-
into free cash.
That
Thank you.
Also makes the chairman nervous.
Did I not set the
You
ground
did?
rules?
You
No.
did?
Launder was one of the words we could not use.
So let's move on.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Reserve fund transfer vouchers, are there any?
There are none.
I think we did very well on that item tonight. Let's skip over to approval of minutes, please. Ask Ms. Lovett to give a half-hour presentation on the first Tuesday in October on how the budget process works.
Half hour, it did 5 minutes, woo.
Cheated yourself 25 minutes.
I did. I
Think
gave
of
you
all the things you could
time.
have said.
I know. I gave you my time, so that was good. That was good, Chair.
I would entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
So move.
A second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They're approved. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Who is our, and I thought it was at this meeting, I could be wrong because it's not here. Who is authorized to sign the payroll?
Heather, it's in
I thought it
this.
was,
Yeah.
Is it- is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's on the,
Oh, I see.
Second.
Oh, new business. Oh, that's
Yeah,
right, I got it
number
under, I remember interrupting the meeting for that, yes, I do.
Old business, any other old business? Anyone? Other than new meeting dates, any new business?
So just on that same line, we will have the voucher for the postage to mail
Yep.
that you'll have to sign, and because now you're meeting more regularly, I'll be calling more regularly because
Yep.
Mary's gonna be doing the minutes. The other question I asked, do you want the meeting minutes in advance of the meeting? Do you want me to email them to you?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I won't read them.
So you want me to bring them to the meeting?
I think so. Yes, that's a yes. Dick, did you want them early to spend a couple extra hours? You good? Yeah. Look, I try to be accommodating. All right, so let's talk about the next meeting dates. It appears as though we're going to have a meeting 2 weeks from tonight, on the 22nd at 7.
I don't see that on this schedule here.
Well, I think that came up earlier, correct? And that's really to vote
Right.
on the articles.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And that'll be its primary purpose. So that's, folks, that's October 22nd here at 7. And then everyone should also be prepared to attend the special town meeting, which is on, I think that's a Monday?
November 18th.
November 18, correct? That'll be at 7. And what we've typically tried to do is meet in the school at about 6:30 at a room down the hall and to the right in the corner, for lack of a better description. Okay?
And desks that remind us of how much weight we've gained since we were
There
high
you
school
go.
students.
Sitting sideways. Yes,
Actually, we're smaller than high school students.
well,
Yeah, today.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not.
Read yourself.
all right. So that's
I used to run
November.
like the wind. Now when I run, there is a wind.
All right. So, Gene, do either you or Matt have a perception that we would need to meet again between now and November 18th, other than on October 22nd or a half hour before November 18th?
I don't
No.
anticipate
Okay,
anything.
all right.
I guess I just want to, looking at the warrant, do you want any other department heads present for the October 22nd meeting?
I don't need anyone. Does anyone else?
I think the economic Like you said before, the economic is the key.
Okay?
So so your questions should all be answered on the October 22nd, so I don't anticipate a need for another
Okay.
meeting after that.
Okay. So then we get to, if you will, post budget reconciliation, right? Heading toward approving a budget for FY 2021. And so, Matt, have you got in here a little bit of who you believe are the people in the timing?
Yes, so in the left-hand column, I don't anticipate, well, I don't know that you need to meet until January 14th or that week of January. Because the exit conference for the auditors will occur the beginning of December, then we'll have the holiday season. By January 14th, we'll start to get some information in, not the least of which would be, we will have finished our capital improvement plan or asset management plan, which I think this committee needs to have some knowledge of. And then the one thing you can do that early in the cycle that Ryan did when he was chair, Pam declined to, but I think is really necessary, is to have that meeting with the Worcester County Retirement Fund.
That's fine.
As painful as it can be, because it's a huge driver. First of all, in absolute dollars, it's a very big account. It's also the most rapidly growing account. I think the taxpayers deserve an explanation from them about what they're doing with all those funds and whether or not they're performing industry standards, yada, yada, yada. But then we can dive right into revenues at the end of January. And that only gives us really 6 weeks, 6 weeks, Mr. Chairman, to pull a budget together.
So what I would suggest tonight then is for folks on our committee that in addition to the October 22 and November 18th, we'll adopt the January 14, January 28, Feb 11, and February 25th FinCom meeting dates.
Okay.
Let's also adopt the March 10th and
March
March
10th.
24th dates. It's the way it works in the spring, plus the March 31 and April 14 meeting dates. So that's your schedule between now and April 14th. Parts of this, who might appear, might move. I apologize. There is one addition. What I would like to see is the school committee in early December.
Okay?
I'd like to see them first in a very preliminary vein, see what their thoughts are, what they're looking for, and why, since their budget drives almost everything else.
When?
So what do we?
So which of these are we not going to have a meeting in?
So we didn't have anything scheduled in December.
Okay.
And to be honest, my experience, Dick, has also been, while December is very busy for everybody, once we get back into the flow of this, it doesn't hurt to have one meeting in December to keep people's minds on the topic, keep it moving. So is there a first Tuesday in December? Does anyone have a calendar?
Well, the first is the Board of Selectmen.
That's the BOS.
So it'll be the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th.
You would be the second, you'd be the 10th.
Well, as long as we keep to our 1 hour concept, I'd like to do December 10. And I understand people's schedules at that point will get really tight. If we can put together 5 folks, that would be great. FinCom folks, and I will make that meeting. So what I would ask then is to have the members of the school committee, or at least the chair, and maybe the superintendent or somebody come. Okay? Anything else on meeting, timing, or issues? And Matthew, maybe I'll take a look at this. We can talk about this maybe either a little more on, probably not in the meeting in 2 weeks or even in November, maybe at the back end of the December meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about the folks you've got lined up and how it seems to play to everybody here, in terms of whether that's a good lineup.
So
Try and keep it as close as we can to what you've suggested.
we're doing all these meetings except, are we doing March 3rd?
So those are our Board of, those are
yeah, those
different
are
dates,
off.
right?
Those are not us, okay.
So we'll send out tomorrow from my office this schedule.
Okay, that's
Just
good.
without necessarily who
Yep.
will be there, just the dates.
Just the schedules, okay, that's good.
All right. Okay, I would entertain one more motion. Any other questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
So last spring on my own, I went to see some of the highway people, just to talk a little bit about some budget issues. And then I also went over to school, talked to the chair of special ed, because I was very curious about the process by which kids don't stay in the Douglas schools anymore, but go to someplace for special ed. And I sort of did that on my own. I never really ran it by Pam, but what do you think about us just on our own, tracking people down and talking to them? You want to know first if we're going to do that, or?
I don't have any problem with that. I think the only concern I have generally, I suppose, is to the extent you're doing it in your capacity as a member of FinCom, it gets me a little anxious whether it's in violation of any open meeting laws or
By
requirements.
yourself if not.
Right. If you got a quorum with you, it is, I think.
Well, as long as you never achieve a rolling quorum either. So
Yeah.
there should be some disclosure, so you run clean of that.
What is a rolling quorum?
So if you,
If one of us win and then
Yeah,
another
sure.
one ran.
and then
Right,
another one,
right.
eventually
Ultimately,
it's
if
5
5 of
people.
us
Right.
went and talked
Talking
to
about-
Mr. Furno,
Oh, no
Right,
kidding.
right, sure,
I did
yeah.
not
now
know
we
that.
have
About a
a rolling
topic,
quorum.
yeah, yeah. So I don't have a problem with it. I suppose on Matthew's suggestion, maybe, I think I would ask then,
Or for instance, I would love to just have coffee sometime with the chair of the school budget committee, just to talk about it. Is that something I could just do, or would I need to let you know first?
I think I'd ask then that you let us know at the next meeting, just that you did it, so it's on a record.
Yeah,
Can we live with that?
yeah.
And so we know we're up to
After
4
you did it.
people, and nobody else can.
Yeah.
Right.
I think in the past, Carol, correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, but haven't we, there've been occasions where we've split off as individuals,
Right.
and like one person would go
Right.
meet with
Right.
the chief of police
Right.
and talk about their
Right.
budget needs, and another person would meet with the,
Right.
the fire chief, and, we have split off amongst
Yeah.
as individuals. It was somewhat more coordinated, I think, where we set at a meeting who we were gonna go meet with, but,
And I think you kind of reported back to,
exactly.
I
So-
seem to remember a discussion that it was okay to do that
Yeah.
as part of the finance committee if we wanted further
Right.
information or
Yeah, your charge is to
clarification.
inquire.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So just ask, report back at the next meeting that you did, and maybe, if you want to, a brief summary, what you talked about.
Who is
I
the
make it,
the chair of the school?
really, it's the chair of it's Brett Argo, is the chair of the committee.
Michael, did you have something?
I do. I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.